Well, we are having a special day. I'm so excited because we have a special speaker that's such a good friend of mine, Eddie Lowen. He's the pastor at Westside Christian Church in Springfield, Illinois. I know a lot of pastor friends around the country. I mean, hundreds of them. And Eddie is one of my all-time favorite friends. I don't want to say pastor friends, but friends. He's one of the best leaders that I know. He's a great communicator, and community is such a better church because of Eddie and his leadership and his church at Westside. We follow about 10 to 15 churches nationally. We call them the influential churches that we learn from. And Westside has probably influenced community as much as any church nationally. So we are way better because of Eddie and because of his church. He's going to be coming out in a moment. So I really want you to welcome him in a big way. But I do want to say this, is that I wanted to invite Eddie to speak because I know what it's like in Illinois in January and February. And so I'm thinking that let him come to South Florida after our teaching series in January, in between series. It'll be nice for him to come to sunny South Florida and get out. They had to cancel services last week in Illinois. And so anyway, well, that's not working out really well that way. It's historic cold. So community, please join with me and give Eddie Lowen a very warm South Florida welcome. Here we go.
Thanks, Scott. Hello, community. I'm so glad to be with you in sunny, warm South Florida. What in the polar vortex is going on with the weather here, people? Raise your hand if you had to Google, how do I turn my heat on? I just wonder how many people down here needed a refresher on that. I saw people from Boston and Minnesota walking around in shorts and t-shirts yesterday, while locals were in ski coats and gloves. It was really funny. So my wife and I visit your part of the world often. And in fact, this is one of our favorite photos taken when we were having one of our favorite meals at a beautiful beachfront inn, not far from your Pompano Beach campus. Perfect weather, perfect setting. We went back to that spot yesterday to recreate that photo, and this is what happened. Seriously, you live in a beautiful part of the country. I'm honored to be with you regardless of the weather. The church that I serve in Illinois is currently helping to plant 2 churches in Florida, in West Palm Beach, and in Sarasota. In fact, one of my friends texted me this morning to show me that he was at the church in Sarasota that we're helping to plant. We also partnered with you and with several other churches to help start a new church in Miami a few years ago. We figure if the entire Midwest is going to move to your state, we should at least help start some churches here. So we're trying to help you out with that. I want you to know that I am just a huge fan of your pastor, Scott Einen. Have you ever known someone who has a fantastic spouse, but the person takes his or her spouse for granted? Well, churches can do that too. Churches can do that with their leaders. And community, I hope you make it a point to remember that Scott and Lori Einen are among the best of the best. They are gold. Let's acknowledge them. It was so wise of your leaders to call Scott to be your lead pastor years ago, so please take great care of him. Scott might actually be the nicest guy in the world, but he is also one of the most effective leaders and compelling communicators that I know. So just take care of him. Scott is too humble to think that he is as special as he is, but I am glad to be able to remind you that he is one of the great ones. Thank God for Scott. I'm calling my message today, Away with Words. When you and I speak, we activate more than 70 muscles to verbalize the words that we use. The average person speaks 16,000 words a day. If you're a man or a woman of few words, it might be 10 or 12,000 words a day. If you're the person who was seated behind me on an airplane recently, you're coming in around 50,000 words a day. You're pulling up the average for the entire human race. Over a lifetime, the typical person will speak 850 million words. And if you happen to preach for a living, anyone here preach for a living, you can likely add a few million words to that count. I have a complicated relationship with words. I like words. You could say, I am fascinated by words. And some of you identify with this because you are very much into words. You like word games. You pay close attention to how you say and you write things. If your kids or your grandkids suggest that you can send text messages without proper punctuation, without capital letters, you respond by saying, I am not a barbarian. Word people pay attention to how things are said and written by other people too. Word people take great joy in catching spelling and grammar errors that other people have overlooked. A true word person might lose a night's sleep if the newscast misspells a word with the on-screen graphic. When there is a typo in a social media post or in an email from the church, the word people think, I may need to find a new church. I might need a new religion. Words are a big part of my life. I lead and I influence with words. I teach and I motivate with my words. My words have helped build some things, but there is another side to that coin. I've done some damage with words too. Years ago, there was an empty lot by our house. I asked my son if he wanted to go out and throw baseball. He did not want to go out. That should have been my cue to say, okay, buddy, we'll do it another time. But that is not what I said. I pressed him to go outside and throw the ball. I required him to do it, and then I fussed at him for not doing it enthusiastically. And at the height of my frustration, I insulted the way that he was throwing the ball, and I saw his eyes well up with tears. It was a lousy dad moment, and I have regretted it ever since. I apologized. I told my son I was wrong, but it was a foolish, counterproductive use of words. And here's the thing. I am using the very same mouth to preach the gospel today. I used the same lips to sing worship songs to God a few minutes ago. James, the brother of Jesus, wrote, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. Have you ever thought about the quality chasm between your best words and your worst? Have you considered how ironic it is that you and I use the same mouth to speak great good and great evil? How many people singing worship songs today will use the same lips to denigrate someone tomorrow? A woman traveled to see her aunt who was dying of cancer. And after the visit, she realized that in several decades of knowing her aunt and hearing her speak hundreds of thousands of words, she'd never heard that woman speak a single word of ridicule or even one insult, not even one. She'd never heard her criticize a family member who was absent from the conversation. She had never heard her make a joke or offer a compliment to one person at another person's expense. She had not even heard her aunt complain about being stricken with cancer or facing death prematurely. Could you contract a terminal disease without complaining once? What a remarkable person. So the woman, the niece of the sick woman, decided to test herself. She would attempt to live for 1 month by the old adage, and you've heard it, if I can't say anything good, I won't say anything at all. And over the next 30 days, she paid more attention to her words than ever before, and she learned that a significant percentage of her daily words were used to mock people with whom she disagreed and to complain about things she did not like. She was shocked by how saturated her words were with negativity. And she did not think of herself as a grumbler, but she had to admit she was. Now, a month is a long time to abide by any virtue, but we could all win the battle against negative words for 1 day, right? Joseph Telushkin is a motivational speaker who challenges listeners to speaking only positive words for a 24-hour period. Some of his listeners agree to try, others scoff and refuse to even attempt it. They admit that there's no way they can avoid negative words, not even for a day. And when Telushkin asked his audience what they would call a person who confessed that he or she lacks the willpower to go 24 hours without drinking, without smoking, without watching TV or surfing online, they all respond that a person who can't control his or her behavior for 24 hours is an addict. And that is when Telushkin points out that many of us have become addicted to toxic words. What's worse is that we have given ourselves permission to accept the addiction. Friends, it is striking how much words matter to Jesus. Jesus offered some of his sternest warnings about words. He taught that words carry heavy consequences. In Matthew 12:36, Jesus said, I tell you this, you must give an account on Judgment Day for every idle word you speak. The words you say will either acquit you or condemn you. Some of us use words as if there will never be a reckoning for them. But Jesus warned that words have eternal consequences. Why? Because God judges the heart, and nothing reveals the heart better, more accurately than our words. So friend, you and I have some very good reasons to welcome God's guidance concerning the roughly 10 million words that we are all likely to speak during 2026. Consider sending yourself a text or making some notes on your phone of the encouragement that I'm going to give you over the next few minutes. Maybe your church's social media team can remind you of these things to keep them in front of you. Consider following the example of the woman that I mentioned earlier by monitoring your words for the next 30 days, or since it's February 1st, maybe the next 28 days. Find a way to get an accurate read on what is coming out of your mouth. So my first encouragement to you is for you to become known for encouraging words. Become known for encouraging words. If you wish people seemed happier when you walk into a room, here's a way to hear people say, "Great to see you," a lot more often. I'm not sure we think about this very often, but we are known to others largely by the words we speak. People assess our character and our values based on the words that we speak. Those words impact them. And by the way, people are not wrong to judge us by our words. None of us can remove all the toxic words from our world, but we can fill the part of the world that we occupy with more encouraging words. And trust me, doing this will make a difference to everyone who crosses paths with us. Craig Groeschel now preaches for the largest church in the country, but he preached his first sermon in a small church where it was customary for the speaker to stand at the exit following the worship service. And as he looks back on his first sermon, he admits it was not a great sermon. He talked too fast. He used some ill-advised humor. Still, most of the people who heard him that day chose to affirm the parts of his message that were praiseworthy. One person, however, did not. On her way out, she said, "I hope there is something else you are good at because it is not preaching." Now, was she entitled to that opinion? Yes. Was she entitled to speak those words to a nervous young preacher? No. The Bible commands us to speak the truth in love. And the tougher the truth is, the more love people need to hear with it. Truth that is spoken without love and concern is really just another form of cruelty. That woman wasn't being honest, she was being rude. And I hate to admit it, but every church seems to have at least one person like that woman. Someone who thinks his or her gift is criticism. And sadly, some churches are infamous for dishing out discouraging words on the regular. Dana Carvey's church lady wouldn't be funny if there was no one like her in reality. I know a number of former pastors who went into ministry with high hopes, but who make a living a different way today, primarily because they can no longer tolerate the barrage of discouraging words spoken to them. Paul told the first century church in Galatia, the entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you keep on biting and devouring each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. Taking each other down a notch is sport in too many churches and too many circles of believers. Evaluation and feedback are important. Those things can actually help people if they are given at the right time, in the right way, by the right people. But toxic, loveless words are poison, while encouraging words are like oxygen to someone who is suffocating. A U.S. senator told a new mailroom clerk that the mailroom had never looked so clean and organized. And that's all he said. He smiled and spoke one sentence of encouragement. When the senator walked past the mailroom a short time later, he saw the clerk wiping away tears. He approached slowly and asked the person, "Are you okay?" And the man replied, "What you said to me is the highest compliment anyone has ever given me." What a sad commentary on the people in that man's life, that the most encouraging thing he'd ever heard was, "You made this room look good." Where are the encouragers? And if the people in our worlds were asked, who are the encouragers, would they name you? Would they name me? If not, we must begin changing that dynamic today. It is so easy to find fault with people, isn't it easy? I mean, they're driving, their conversational style, their driving, their attire, their manners, their driving. And listen, some of the criticism may be accurate, but look at the standard that God has created for his people in Ephesians 4:29. Paul wrote, "Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them." So as long as what you and I say, as long as it's true, God authorizes us to say it, right? Wrong. Being truthful is only part of the threshold we are required to meet with our words. God says, if your words are not good, if your words are not helpful, stay quiet. So, if it is not good and helpful, don't post it. If you've already posted it, go delete it. And if your motive is not to be good, if it is not to be helpful, then restrain yourself from saying it. A counselor had her last appointment of the day. It was a teenage girl with parents who were self-absorbed and impossible to please. And the girl was also ostracized at school by the mainstream kids. And after the counselor earned her trust, the girl pulled up her sleeve and showed the counselor where she had carved the word empty into her skin. Friend, what do you think is missing from the life of a person who has a pervasive sense of emptiness? The Lord, certainly. But the only other thing that I can think of, the only other missing thing is affirming words. Encouraging words. Proverbs 18:21 says the tongue can bring death or life. That is how consequential your words are. Your words bring life to others, or they bring the stench of death to others. Do the people who hear you speak walk away more empty? I challenge us, even if it requires a wholesale change in how we speak, to become known for words that bring life to those who hear what we have to say. I have a second challenge for you, and that is to become known for your grateful words. One of my best friends began doing a small thing a few years ago that changed his life. He noticed that he was waking up in a bad mood many mornings. Does this happen to you? So he asked the spiritual coach, "What can I do about this?" And the coach asked him some questions and said, "You're waking up in a bad mood because you're going to sleep in a bad mood. And there is a simple antidote. It's gratitude. So before you go to sleep, spend 5 minutes writing down a few things for which you are grateful." And when my friend told him, "I always pray before I go to bed," the coach said, "Well, that's fine, but you are not closing that time of prayer with a gratitude list." And that means you are not practicing what I am suggesting. So my buddy took the advice and he began closing his nightly prayer time by journaling 3 things for which he is grateful. Never goes to sleep without doing it. He won't go to bed without this exercise. And the result is he sleeps better, his dreams are even more positive, and he wakes up in a hopeful, grateful mood. He said, it's been a life changer for me. And that might be the one nugget from today's sermon that changes your life, friend. And if it sounds trite, I disagree. This is very spiritual. The Bible teaches that you and I can actually bless God with our words. And that blows me away, that you and I can bless the God who already knows everything and who already has everything. God is blessed by hearing grateful words. When we give God our gratitude, we give God something that he did not possess before. We are blessing him. Do you know all those places in the Bible where it says, give thanks, give thanks? That is God inviting you to bless him with something that he does not already have. And when you bless God, it will always bless you. A number of years ago, when our kids were 16 and 14 years old, our family took a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Europe, and we visited 3 countries. We went to Italy, France, and England. My wife and I repeatedly impressed on our kids how fortunate we were to be able to make a trip like this. We wanted them to be grateful for the trip. I spent 100+ hours planning the trip, the air travel, train, travel, lodging, excursions. My wife worked hard to get everything ready and organized for us. We took only carry-on suitcases because we wanted our kids and ourselves to know that we could do that. One of the best conversations that we had on our trip was in a laundromat in Venice, Italy, of all places. We wanted it to be a trip that our kids would remember fondly for the rest of their lives. Well, it was a very special trip that we still recall. Italy was incredible. France was perfect. We connected with missionary friends along the way, and the trip was delightful. I'll never forget sitting outside of a restaurant in Paris, laughing and eating at 10 p.m. when it wasn't even completely dark outside. And I remember thinking, remember this moment, Eddie, remember this moment. But by the time we made it to London, we had been away from home 2+ weeks, which means we had been with each other for 2+ weeks. So we began to get cranky with each other. And it all came to a head in London on Westminster Bridge, right between Parliament and Big Ben on one side and the London Eye on the other. Some of you have been to that very spot. You know exactly where we were. The weather was hot. The bridge was crowded. We were all hungry. My daughter was 15. After one complaint too many, my wife, who is the most kind and patient person in our family by a long shot, my wife may or may not have threatened to throw one of our offspring off the Westminster Bridge. I told this story at my church once, and my wife got fan mail from other moms. I'm not kidding. A chorus of moms chanted with one voice, "Now we know the pastor's wife is one of us." Now you might think, Holy Moses, that's not very godly, but it is actually exactly like Moses and God. That is how God responded to the Israelites when, after rescuing them from slavery in Egypt, after drowning their enemies in the Red Sea, after providing food for them every day by miraculous means, the people could only bring themselves to complain. It did not matter how many times God met their needs. They complained. They whined. They wanted something more. They wanted something different, just like our kids on the Westminster Bridge. And in Exodus 16:8, Moses told them something that you and I should remember more often. Moses said, "Your complaints are against the Lord, not against us." We think we are complaining about people. God hears it as a complaint about himself. When we complain, God takes it personally. He's insulted. So it is time for us to determine, every one of us, that we will be known for grateful words. I have one final challenge for you. to become known for fewer words. By fewer words, I'm not suggesting that we sulk or give people the silent treatment. And I'm not saying talk less, smile more, like Aaron Burr said in the musical Hamilton. Those forms of fewer words are manipulation. I'm encouraging you to ask God to teach you to have less to say. Bring the word count in your life down. Stop being the person who cannot stand silence, who is obsessed with filling the void with your words. Stop explaining when you don't have a valid explanation. Stop arguing when you don't have a sound argument, or even when you do. Stop racing to have the first word and the last. And if that sounds like it's going to be hard for you, I want you to know that the struggle is real for me too. It was not a box office hit, but I like the Eddie Murphy movie, 1,000 Words. Eddie plays Jack McCall in that film. He is a fast-talking agent who uses words to overwhelm people, to manipulate people, to always promote himself. When the line at Starbucks is too long for Jack, he pulls out his phone and pretends that a hospital is calling with news that his wife is in labor, giving birth to twins. It's a lie, but he is rushed to the front of the line and he even gets his coffee free. Don't try that tomorrow. That's a negative illustration. While meeting with his therapist, he dominates the appointment to such an extent with chatter about himself, and he leaves before his counselor can even offer him advice or perspective. But when a tree magically appears in his backyard, Jack learns that it holds 1,000 leaves, and that every time he speaks a word, one leaf falls to the ground. And before long, Jack realizes that when the final leaf falls from the tree, he will die. And so from that moment on, Jack becomes very aware of his words. He begins to regret his selfish words, his misleading words. And he realizes how badly he has wasted words and abused words. You know, sometimes even when the motive for our words is right, the number of our words is just too high. I want us to watch a British skit that will help us remember this lesson.
Men of Rastor, my brothers, this day you fought with honor. This day you vanquished those that mean to smite us. The Dark Lord forged his enemies to reap their terror, but we persevered and slayed them forthwith. In the years to come, they will sing our victory song, as we sung for our forefathers.
Sorry.
And the
Sorry, guys. Just one thing I thought I might bring up.
Whatever is it, brother of the watch, fellow kinsman?
Yeah, this.
Honored knight of the third men.
This is what I want to talk about. We are using way too many words, guys.
How doth thou mean, proud warrior of the north? Brave son of the arm?
There. That's what we could really speed things up around here if we just cut down on the wordage.
How so, brother of the cloth? Defender of the north?
Well, like in battle today, when you yelled, I'm paraphrasing, but noble horde, raise thy shields, from yonder field of battle approaches, is it thy enemies' arrows?
Yeah.
Yeah, next time, just yell duck. I reckon. You know, I mean, a lot of us died before you finished talking.
So, not speak in such an elongated way for the sake of time.
Exactly. Actually, and just while we're on the topic, we were just talking about this, weren't we? The tales that we tell, the one about the ring and the short, hairy foot people, maybe that could be just one story, you know, instead of 6 3-hour unnecessarily long stories.
Some merit you may have in your words, my brother. I see how my verbose retelling may elongate the...
I don't think you do.
No?
Yeah, even this, the victory speech you're making, I don't know. I just think maybe just say we won or something. You know, you guys, yeah?
Your words have resonated deep in my mind, my brother.
Again, I don't think they have, because he's still doing it.
We won!
Just yell duck. A lot of us died while you were talking. I wonder how many times I will have to relearn the lesson that fewer words are better in my parenting, in my work, in my friendships, in my preaching. When it comes to words, less is more. We know this is true with other people's words, but it is hard to realize with our own words. This is the wisdom behind James 1:19. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. I like the Message paraphrase of Proverbs 17:27. It's so clear. The one who knows much says little. An understanding person remains calm. Even dunces who keep quiet are thought to be wise. As long as they keep their mouths shut, they're smart. Is the Bible awesome or what? So let's drop the pretense and say less. Here's the principle. More word restraint brings less word regret. You let that sink in. I'm gonna let that sink in right now and begin practicing this principle right now. Let's pray. God, we hear you calling us to a reformation in our lives when it comes to words. And please help our hearts to catch fire today with the reality that if we will hear and heed this teaching, Father, it will absolutely transform our relationships at home, at work, in our community, in our church. So I pray you'll open our ears, help us hear and remember this, and transform us. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.